I want to set the poll question on the YouTube for our next topic. And it is, I want this team to be the worst in the nation. Clemson, Florida, or Florida State. Why did we pick those three, Caleb?
Well, I think there is a legitimate debate over which power program is in bigger trouble long term, because it started. I'll be honest. It started. Two of them was Clemson and Florida because they're related to Tennessee. Tennessee plays Florida, and they're major recruiting rivals with Clemson. But then I thought, you got to throw Florida State in there too, because for the same reasons, I think Clemson might be in bigger trouble than Florida, which we'll get to. Florida State also might be in trouble. And so I had to throw Florida State in there.
So it leads us to honor of Norm Macdonald.
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
Caleb, you tried to pitch me at our 3:45 a.m. production meeting that Tennessee fans should want Clemson and Florida State to be worse than Florida. Caleb, please try to somehow convince me of that, because right now it's about 80% Florida on our YouTube poll question. Please vote and tell me why in the message board. But it's got to be Florida, who you play every year, unless the schedule gets changed again, right?
No, it doesn't. Let me ask you this question, Dave.
Yes.
How good was Florida in the 90s?
They were very good.
How good was
championship, 2 SEC titles?
Florida, they won 5 SEC titles, 4 straight in the 90s. Actually, I think 6. This was Florida in the 90s.
Yeah, 6. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
How good was Clemson in the 90s?
Clemson in the 90s was not very good.
No, they were not. Now, how good was Tennessee in the 90s?
Tennessee was very good. One of the best programs in the nation.
All right, now let's go to the last 15 years. In the post-Urban Meyer era, how good has Florida been?
Not good at all.
How good has Clemson been?
Respectable.
They're the second best program of the last 15 years. That's not respectable. They're elite. They've been more successful than Tennessee was in the 90s.
No, I agree.
Now, how good has
Giving
Tennessee
you a hard time.
How good has Tennessee been the last 15 years?
Not good.
So it's proof that when Florida's good and Clemson's bad, Tennessee can still be great. But when Clemson's good and Florida's bad, it doesn't really help Tennessee, because the problem is recruiting. Tennessee and Clemson are recruiting similar prospects, so you want Clemson to fall further than Florida. You're going to be fine if Florida's good. That's not going to hurt you. It hurts you if Clemson is good.
Elias is, I believe, one of our best posters. He says there's a convoluted argument that a strong UF hurts Georgia and we recruit more against Clemson.
Very true.
Now, he threw that second part in there that, yes, there's a lot of guys right at the border of Georgia, Florida, and I'm talking about close to the Gulf, that choose between Georgia and Florida. So if Florida's good, that hurts Georgia. If Clemson's bad, that helps Tennessee in recruiting. Is that basically your argument? Adam agrees with you for some reason.
Yes.
Guys, you're all crazy, because here's the bottom line. If you've got a gimme win on your schedule, and Tennessee used to have that with Florida in the 80s. They had that with Alabama in the 90s. I mean, when Florida's good, they win a football game. When Clemson's good, you might or might not play them. Come on, Caleb. This is insane.
Would you take a gimme win? Okay, hold on. You add one extra gimme win to your schedule, but you never have a top 10 recruiting class. You get rid of that gimme win, but you load up on top 5 classes every year. What are you doing?
Well, that's a big if and a hypothetical, Caleb.
No, it's not a hypothetical. You sound like a politician. I don't do hypotheticals. No, okay. I can't tell you how many politicians I've interviewed that I hate them when they say, I don't do hypotheticals. That just means you don't want to answer the question because you're worried about the political fallback.
It's true. That's exactly what that was by me just then.
Yes.
100%. You would rather have the top 5 recruiting class, but if Florida is a guaranteed win, Tennessee's going to benefit because they can recruit in Florida too. Let's not discount that. The Vols, I still remember the Demetrius Morley trio out of Miami. They took them away from the University of Florida, and that was a huge monster get. I remember Gerald Williams was a part of like 15 classes because he couldn't graduate. And then there was another offensive lineman. Somebody may be able to help me on the message board, but there was a trio.
There was Travis Henry also, but
well, I'm just talking about particularly the trio out of South Florida. They beat Florida 4 in about 2000. Would that have been about 2008? And
yeah, how'd the next 4 years work out?
Well, not grand. I guess that would have been 2007 now I look back at it. But I understand your argument. I understand you want Clemson to be down. But I already think, and David Sanders is a great example, I already think Tennessee's going to win in the Carolinas. I don't think Clemson has to be any worse than what they are right now, to be frank with you.
Tennessee's winning in the Carolinas because Clemson is way, way, way down. And that because they let things slip. Clemson went straight into Knoxville, straight into East Tennessee, in Oak Ridge, and they plucked T. Higgins out of there. Then they went to Knoxville and got T. Martin's son to commit to them. Then they went to North Georgia and got Trevor Lawrence, who grew up a lifelong Vol fan. So they picked a lifelong Vol fan, the son of Tennessee's national championship from Knoxville, family in Knoxville, the son of Tennessee's national championship winning quarterback, and a superstar receiver out of Oak Ridge. Before they even won a national title, Dave, they got those guys committed to them. They just plucked them straight out of Knoxville, straight out of Tennessee. You need Clemson to go down. And I point this out because Tennessee is at their best when they're plucking the Carolinas and they're plucking both. Because you're right. In the 90s, you had Leonard.
Thank you, Daniel. Sorry, go ahead.
You had Leonard Little and Sean Bryson in the 90s from North Carolina. But from South Carolina, you had the entire defensive line from South Carolina. And so you need Clemson to be down.
Oh, and I know all this. But how about Clemson was up because Tennessee was down on their own accord? In other words, Tennessee was the cause and effect. It wasn't Dabo, I'm super recruiter and beating you for T. Higgins and Amari Rodgers and Trevor Lawrence. It was the fact that Tennessee was, in the mess kit.
That's factually true. That's absolutely true. But here's the thing. Just because that's the catalyst for it, that doesn't mean that now Clemson's got the upper hand. So yes, Tennessee falling led to Clemson's rise. But once Clemson had the rise, the ball was in their court to fall before Tennessee could really take over again. They have fallen. Clemson has fallen. Olympus has fallen. Clemson has fallen. Tennessee is in prime position now to take it back. Once you do fall, this is the problem with when you fall as a program, Dave. You know this. Unless you're LSU, and or Ohio State or Georgia, when you fall, you got to work extra hard to get back up and into that room. The other team has to, the rival recruiting schools have to fall for you to get back in. Clemson is falling, which is good. And largely because, some of this self-inflicted. Dabo being so committed to no transfers. We don't believe in that. He's wrecking the program on his own with his philosophy. So I can't believe he's wrecking what he built, but
yep.
Yeah.
I want to thank our friends at the Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online. Now, who do you think is more likely to fall apart? The Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards to ensure you only receive the best in CBD or Delta products. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED. That's HOOKED for 10% off. If it's a stock market, who do you think falls the furthest? Because I think Florida is they are in the beginning of a decade of dysfunction, to quote Mr. Nagy, who wrote the book. I believe they are in the beginning of that.
See, here's the thing.
I don't think let me ask you, just to make it really crystal clear. Who has a losing season first, if either?
Florida, because Florida is playing Florida's already had two, and they're going to have more in the near future because they're playing in the SEC. I don't necessarily think that means they're going to fall harder, though. And I don't know. And Dave, you can help me out with this because I don't know what to do with this. The college football playoff is going to put ACC teams in every year, right?
Mm-hmm.
But don't you also agree with me that even Miami, who just blew out Florida, the gap is so significant between the SEC and the ACC now, or the Big Ten and the ACC, that there's going to be that the recruiting gap is going to get larger and larger to a point that in 5 years, won't ACC teams in the college football playoff look like group of 5 teams in there? And here's why I think they could fall harder. As long as they're in the ACC, I don't think it's possible for Clemson or Florida State or even Miami to recruit at a top 10 level anymore. And and that's the thing. Florida, whatever you think about them, as incompetently run as they are, if they opened the checkbook and got Lane Kiffin next year, I'm pretty sure they could get top 10 talent.
Yep. Okay. Here's what I think happens over the next 5 years. I think Florida, and tell me if you agree or disagree, Florida goes through at least 2 coaches, and Clemson stays knocking on the door at the college football playoff, but never really puts together a team that you're afraid of. That's how I see it playing out the next 5 years. Agree or disagree?
I actually agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. They go, unless Florida gets Lane Kiffin. Y'all can say I'm a huge fan, maybe too much, but I think if Lane Kiffin's at Florida, he's going to win a lot there.
I think so too. And I think that's what you don't want. So maybe you want Florida to be average like Clemson for a little bit longer, but that thing's done. I mean, the Billy Napier press conference, if that didn't prove to you that it's done. I mean, just his body language. I mean, you could tell. So I don't even think that's a question.
So what about, because I threw Florida State in the mix because they're 0-2 now. Do you think Florida State or Clemson, or is Florida State more or less likely to resurrect themselves than Clemson or Florida right now?
Well, resurrect themselves this season?
No. Like 5-year plan, like you talked about. 5-year plan as a program.
To be a championship competitor, I would see Dabo Swinney at some point retiring in that time frame. So the better program in 5 years, I think, will be Florida State. What do you think? Of the 3, unless Lane gets the Florida job.
I still think it's Florida, because Florida, as in bad as shit. Let me give you an example. LSU is the most incompetently run organization in all of the SEC. They always have been. I don't know why, but just for some reason, they're so incompetently run. And then they hired Ed Orgeron. But they did land Steve Ensminger and Joe Brady and got Joe Burrow. And so they still got a national title out of it. Sometimes you can stumble into the right coach, even when you're a terribly run administration. And because they're in the SEC, I'm higher on Florida being able to make a run. Also, just want to point this out. You can call me crazy, Dave. I think Florida State and Clemson going to public war with the ACC, I think it's affecting their players.
That's crazy.
There's no way they're thinking about that.
Teams that have filed a lawsuit against the ACC are 0-3 on the season.
Okay, explain why. 15 seconds. Brought to you by friends at Newbert Collision Center, who brings us John Adams each and every Tuesday.
5th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Newbert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Newbert Collision Center.
Okay, so who are the 3 that have sued the NCAA?
Oh, no, it's just 2, Florida State and Clemson. And Florida State's already 0-2 with 2 losses to unranked teams, and Clemson got draxed by Georgia.
There's no that's a coincidence. Are you telling me that's not a coincidence?
Florida State has been feeling a type of way about being left out of the national title, the college football playoff last year. They know it's because of their ACC ties. The distractions all summer were about trying to get out of the ACC. They're not going to be able to do it. We're telling you guys this up front. And we had T. Scott Jones on a couple of times, and it changed my views. I think Dave and I, among sports media, are speaking alone among everybody else, which is we're saying Florida State and Clemson are stuck in that conference. And I don't think there's a way out. And I think the fights about that are infecting the players. They're infecting the fans, because Dave, I can just tell you this right now. Clemson and Florida State fans, they are super nervous about the future and the state of their programs, because they know that if they can't get out of the ACC, they will fall to second tier. And y'all can, and by the way, Miami will too. They're getting lucky right now because they landed Cam Ward. You land a generational quarterback, you can always have a good year, but same thing's going to happen to them. But they're not freaking out right now because they got Cam Ward. Florida State and Clemson are freaking out. And that freak out from the fans is infecting the players. I've covered too many college football programs, Dave. The sentiment of the fans infects the players and infects the locker room long term. That's why Tennessee makes mistake after mistake against Florida, because the fan base is telling the players constantly, we can't beat Florida. We always lose to Florida. And it infects these 18 to 19-year-olds. And so the first time a mistake is made against Florida, they believe it themselves that they can't win, and they spiral.
I tend to agree with that.